morning and welcome to Mountain Patriot Homestead. I am out in the garden today. I'm actually finishing up a project that I had started yesterday evening, but I started so late that it started getting dark on me, so I had to stop. So I'm back out here this morning because I am picking green beans, and let me just show you my green bean patch. Hold on just a second. Okay, this is my green beans right here. And I have told you before when I first planted these that I plant very tightly together. I don't use the normal spacing that is recommended because I know that it is said that your harvest are diminished if you have, let me show you my little bees. Yep, he flew by so quick I didn't see him. Oh, there he went. That your harvest will be diminished if you plant things too tightly together. However, I also, by experimenting throughout the years, have found that the more I plant, the more I get. And this, which would seem to make sense. Let me just show you. I don't know if you can even see down in there, but I have so many. Now, one of the things that does make it difficult when you plant this tightly together is finding it, because yes, you do have to get down in there, you do have to dig in amongst it to find them, but I have always found that the harvests are just phenomenal, at least the years that you don't have a drought or you don't have you don't have extenuating circumstances. But this year I've had plenty of water so far, and things are just growing wonderfully. As you can see, everything is just, if anything, everything's a little over exuberant. I mean, I've got deal that is gotten so heavy, some of it's falling out of the beds. My runner beans, you can see they have taken off and they are indeed running. And then on the other side of the hoop, I've got some other beans that are coming up over, and everybody's meeting in the middle. So everything is looking beautiful. And I'm just out here gonna get into more of this harvest I picked yesterday evening just off of a few plants. I picked so many. I think off of three plants, I picked almost a dishpan full of beans. So anyway, I am fixing to dig off into this and see how many we can come up with. I have brought out just a mesh bag from the corn that you've seen me put up here recently. So I have brought that out. I'm just going to use that to put my beans in. And when I am done, I am going to take them up on the porch and get them snapped. So let's get picking. just finished up what I would call a light picking. I went all the way down this one bed that I have and picked the obvious stuff. I could probably come right back through behind what I've just done and picked almost this many again. But I do have a lot of small beans that will be ready in the next few days, so I will be coming back out to do this again real soon. But right now, I'm going to get to the house and get started on snapping these beans. So I thought we'd just come back to the porch and visit a spell while I sit here and snap these beans. Now there is noise in the background. There always is, because of course this is our home, this is our farm, so there's always something going. And my mister is out mowing this morning because the grass is growing to beat the band. We have had such a nice amount of rain this year that everything is just growing tremendously. Well, you saw the garden. You know, I've shown you the garden previously, and then I showed you the garden this morning, the beans, and everything's just growing crazy. So he's out mowing, so that's one of the sounds you'll hear. If the wind blows in your ear, I'm sorry. Even if I could stop that, by the wind blowing I mean, I would not, because it feels wonderful. So I am sitting here on the porch and I'm just going to snap these beans that we've gathered. And I say we, I count you as helping me. But we're just going to talk a little bit, if you don't mind. And when we get to the end of this video, if you don't mind, if you'd like and subscribe, if you're not one of my subscribers, I'd be more than happy to have you as part of the Mountain Patriot Homestead family. And you can just hit that subscribe, and then it don't cost nothing. And then down there, just make sure that you get all notifications so you don't miss anything. But anyway, since we have been out in the garden already, I thought we'd just talk a minute about gardening today. And when I talk to you about gardening, I'm not telling you how to do anything. I'm just telling you how I do things. Kind of like when I'm in the kitchen cooking, you know, it's how I do it. It's you don't have to do anything the way somebody else does if you don't want to. But I garden. Why do I garden? Well, you know, I have a lot of friends, a lot of people I know that they don't garden at all. They go to the grocery store, they get what they need. Is that okay? Absolutely. You know, you do what you have to with what you have. And if you don't have the time, if you don't have the space, if you don't have the inclination to garden, then by all means, if you want to go to the store and buy your stuff, you go to the store and get it, and you don't let nobody, sorry, got a hair tickling my nose, you don't let nobody shame you about what you have to do or what you want to do. But why do I garden? Well, gardening is kind of I guess it's a generational thing, more or less, because, you know, my kinfolk have gardened as long back through history as I know. Ones that came from across the waters, they were farmers. The census, the U.S. Census, most of the genealogy, the family that I pull up, my ancestors, most of them had down farmer as their occupation. So I'm not going to call myself a farmer because I'm not. We live out here on a farm. It would be a hobby farm to those that have real farms. But, you know, we have almost 30 acres here where we're at, and it's more than enough to do what we need to do on it. But when I was growing up as a little girl, in North Carolina, up in the western part of the state, we had a garden. And we lived not far from Grandma and Grandpa's house. As a matter of fact, Grandma and Grandpa's house is probably, I'd say probably, that you can't see it because I'm pointing like you can see it, but it's probably wasn't as far as from here to the end of our drive from my Grandma and Grandpa's house. And we had a big old garden that we all got out and shared with them. And Daddy'd get out there and he'd plow up. If I remember correctly, Daddy said it was 5 acres. You know, I was a kid, so I didn't know anything about acres. I just knew that was a big old garden. But he said it was 5 acres, and I have no reason to doubt that because I know it was big. And we grew everything. We pretty much anything that we were eating that was vegetable related, we grew it. And we had corn. I know my grandpa had a corn crib up there close to his barn, and he'd store feed corn in it because we didn't raise a lot of sweet corn. I don't remember us raising sweet corn until we moved to Texas. In North Carolina, I just remember us growing what they call field corn. And you know, if you wanted it sweet, if you wanted to make sweet corn, when you got ready to cook it, you put sugar in it, and that was sweet corn. But that field corn was everything from the cattle feed. You know, we'd dry it, and then I remember sitting there and my hands just being raw whenever you got ready to feed. And you know, you're sitting there and the corn kernels are dry, and you're sitting there and you twisting your hands around them cobs to loosen up them kernels off so you could toss the feed out. I remember the field corn being used to make cornmeal, being used to make grits, and if you're wondering what I'm doing, these have blooms stuck to them, little pieces of grass, that sort of thing. That's what I'm doing. But anyway, that corn was used pretty much for everything. Now, one of my favorite things that Mama done with that field corn was made pickled corn. And I don't know if you've ever had pickled corn. You might have if you've ate at a big salad bar where they've got, that wind's blowing me out. I'm sorry. I have no control over that wind. And I've tried to use the little buffer microphone thing, and apparently I'm not smart enough to figure out how it works. But anyway, if you've ever eaten at a big salad bar, it's got them little teeny baby corn that don't even have kernels on them yet, that are pickled. It's really not the same thing. These are full ears of corn, and Mama had a crock, and she would put them ears of corn down in there, you know, point side down into them jars, or into the crock, and make it fit in that crock. And then she'd put a brine on it like you'd put if you was making, pickled beans, dill pickle, whatever. If you was making pickles, you'd use a pickle brine. And she'd put that down on there, and then she'd put a plate or something on top of it to make sure everything held under the water or under the brine. And she'd let that sit in that corn pickle. We done the same thing with beans. We'd take beans and do the same thing. As a matter of fact, we pickled a lot of stuff out of the garden because for the longest, we didn't have a freezer. We pickled, we canned meats, we smoked, we cured it in some way, and then we got a little, one of them little chest type freezer things, and kept some of the meats in that. But I remember Mama even canning meat, and I still, when my husband weed eats out in the garden, sometimes it blows grass up on it. That's what I'm getting off of here. But she would can meat, and I still can meat sometimes too, especially sausage, like breakfast sausage. You know, it's excellent canned. So we had a huge garden. Grandma and Grandpa would get out there, mostly Grandma with her little apron on. She's so cute. And she'd get out there and she'd just garden up a storm, and we'd get out there. And I remember as a kid, uh, you know, pulling up weeds and just helping my daddy, walking in his tracks. You know, it was if he backed up, he stepped on me because I was going to be right on his heels. Sometimes literally right on his heels. And but you know, that was our garden in North Carolina. And then when we moved to East Texas, you know, we had a big garden there. But Daddy had 3 different gardens there. I'll say 3 different, got 3 different plots, and all 3 of them were good sized, and he grew different things in different ones. But we always had big garden, and we always had fruit trees. In North Carolina, we had fruit trees. We had chestnut trees. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, chestnuts died out in the early 1900s. No, we had chestnut trees in North Carolina. They weren't huge, but they were producing chestnut trees. And I'll tell you how I know that for a fact is I was chasing one of my cousins one day after the chestnut burrs had fallen off the trees, and I was running out through there and fell right in the middle of a big old batch of them, hands and knees right into the middle of a big patch of old dried burrs. Well, if you've never seen a chestnut burr, them suckers are like, oh, I don't even know how to describe them. They have these prickly spine things on them, and it's like touching a porcupine. When you touch them, they're going to go in you. And I had them things, I bet, working out of my knees for 2 years. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I still don't have some of them in my knees. But, yeah, we for a fact had chestnut trees there. And no, they weren't chinky pins. I know what a chinky pin is too. So, no, these weren't chinky pins. But we had fruit trees. We had fruit trees in East Texas. Mama made wonderful plum jelly, and Daddy always had grapevines. And even if we didn't have grapevine, like in North Carolina, I don't remember us having grapevines, but we would go out and pick muscadines. We'd always go out and pick dewberries and blackberries and all that sort of thing. So we always had fruit. Now, we didn't have a lot of oranges or things like that, but we always had fruit, but it was usually locally grown. I remember us driving further up into the mountains when we lived in North Carolina. I don't know if you can hear those purple martins, but all of their babies have learned how to fly, and it's like, looks like 50 of them flying out across through there, just back and forth. That's the birds that you're hearing. But I remember us driving further up into the hills to Peach Orchard up there, and we picked a bunch of peaches. I don't know what they call them now, but back then they called them Indian peaches. And when you'd when you'd open them up, they was red inside. And I remember Mama pickling some of those, sweet pickling those, and oh my goodness, those were so good. But we always had pears and apples and, you know, just different things, a variety. Pepper looking for a daddy. But, you know, that's kind of the history of my gardening background, was, you know, being raised up in it. And to me, things just don't taste the same going and getting them from the store as they do growing them. But, you know, have I bought things from the store? Yes, and I still do. You know, if there's a good sale on, you know, there's a good sale on green beans, and I want to put some up just to make sure we have plenty, I will. I mean, no shame. Again, don't let people shame you into what you have or what you use. Use what you got and be smart. You know, make sure that you got plenty. And anyway, so that's my background in the gardening. So I garden. I don't have a big garden. I don't need a big garden anymore. You know, my boys are all grown and gone, and so, you know, I don't need a huge garden no more. But my gardening, I've told you this on other videos before. My husband always laughs because my garden, he says, is an experiment every year. Because every year I change something on my garden. And he's right. Because every year I learn something different. I learn what's working, what's not. One year I may just be lazy and want to do it a different way. One year I may decide I want to try something new. Now I'll tell you what my downfall is, and that is a shout out to Baker Creek Seed Company, because they aren't very far up the road from here. And yeah, they got more pretty things and more seeds. Now I know, you know, everybody's got their favorite. I know when I was a kid, Daddy'd get a lot of seeds from the feed store, which I've got seeds from the feed store. But he'd also order them from Burpee. I think he'd order them from Burpee. And, you know, just a lot of times it was saving seeds from what you had that you grew the year before. I do that too. And, but yeah, my gardening changes every year. Every year I like to try something new. As a matter of fact, I got a couple of different new runner beans out there in the garden this year that I'm trying. You know, I enjoy it because I'll try new things, and if it's something goats are being crazy. If it's something I really like, I will continue growing it. If it's something that's like, yeah, didn't taste that good, or didn't produce that well here, or whatever, I won't bother with it again. No need wasting my time. Time's valuable, right? So, you know, I experiment with methods of growing. I have raised beds now. When I was younger, I had all in-ground stuff. As I've gotten older, raised beds definitely work for me, and they are productive. I can amend the soil so easy with them, and so I just like my raised beds. That's what I use mostly. And the weed issue seems to be a lot easier for me to control with them in raised beds. You know, just again, everybody has to figure out how they like to do things. But I do enjoy gardening. It's work. I'm not going to fool you. I'm not going to say, oh yeah, it's easy. Well, you know, sticking a seed in dirt is easy. Watching it grow is easy. But there's going to be those days that, you know, you're just pressed for time, and things need watering, things need picking. It's just like these beans. I went out there this morning and I picked beans. It's my day off, so I was able to get out there and pick them. If it was a day I was working, I'd have to work all day, have to come in, fix supper, feed, then get out there. Sorry, it's another big gust of wind. Get out there and work in getting these picked, and then trying to work in time to get them put up, because this is the part that takes time. Now, I've seen some folks that, you know, on some of these cooking shows, you know, chefs, and I'm not saying this is wrong, where they'll take these beans and they'll just all line them, they'll line them all up next to each other, and they'll just, you know, they'll cut off the ends and they'll cut them up. Ain't got a problem with that if you're cooking them right then, but I prefer to get them ready, because I'm gonna either can these, I may freeze them. If I'm freezing them, I'm gonna vacuum pack them so there's no freezer burn or anything like that. But again, it's what do I have time for? And this time of year, I'll tell you another Another thing that determines how I put my stuff by is what the weather's doing and whether I want to heat up my house or not. Because, you know, canning, it's hot, and it's you've got to keep the stove rolling because you got to get your canner going, and it heats up the house. Well, if it's really hot outside, I don't want to heat up the house. But that's that. You know, that's another thing that would determine how I would put stuff up. Again, do what you've got to do with what you have. And anyway, what I was talking about, methods of how I do my garden. I do the intensive bedding. I know that's not a name. I know that's probably not anything that's any type of a terminology that makes any sense, but I call it intensive gardening because I have no regard for what space, how much space is supposed to be between plants. I used to garden that way. I had my daddy gardened that way, my grandma gardened that way, everybody I know gardens that way, where they just have, you know, everything's got to be, you know, so much space apart, you know, beans need to be 6 inches, whatever. It's got to have a certain space. Well, you know, I used to do that, and to the point that I would measure. And then you would have the issue with bugs, and you would have the issue with weeds, with the ground getting dry, and then you having to mulch, and just all these issues that I would have. And so for years, that's all I knew. That's again, it was passed down. That knowledge of how to do it was passed down, and that's what I did. But what changed it was when we moved to West Texas. In East Texas and West Texas, if you've never been to Texas, or maybe you've been and you've only been to one side of the state or the other, and you think Texas is either a piney woods thicket, or you think Texas is, you know, Monument Valley from a western, no, that Texas is so varied. It probably has every type of landscape that you could think of, from swamps to hills to canyons to desert and thickets, and just about any type of terrain and climate that you can think of. A coast. It's got a little bit of everything. Well, coming from East Texas and moving to West Texas was a definite change, and so totally had to rethink gardening, because, you know, gardening in East Texas, where they did at least get, you know, rainfall most of the time, or the temperatures weren't like furnace degrees. You know, we just we gardened a certain way in East Texas. Well, West Texas was definitely a different environment. You go to a desert environment where rainfall's minimal, and where the humidity's not as much, but I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. If you step outside and it feels like you've stepped into an oven, that's hot. And so do the plants thinking so as well. So I had to rethink my gardening. So that's when I started planting things a little closer together, and just mulching. I did mulch a lot, but then I realized the closer I planted them, the less I had to mulch. And I also started realizing the closer I planted them, the less I had to water. And my plants started doing better, and things started growing more and getting bigger and being more fruitful. And that got me to thinking of, maybe I'm onto something. So we moved up here, and moving up here, I planted in the ground. Let me refill my green beans. Hold on just a second. And moving up here, when I first started out, I had an in-ground garden and started trying. I was thinking, well, the environment here is more similar to East Texas than it is to West Texas. So maybe I can space the plants back out again. And I did. Well, it gets pretty warm here. It's not Texas hot, East or West Texas hot here up on the mountains. So, I can't say that, but it does get warm here, and the sun is hot here, and so the ground will dry out quicker than it does, when it's not hot. It makes perfect sense. But I started out trying to plant with things spaced further apart, and I changed my methods back to what I used to do. Then I started seeing a lot of insect issues, started seeing a lot of weeds, because of course weeds here grow crazy. And the ground was just dry. I was having to water a lot, and water here is expensive. So I done that for a while until I was about ready to just say, forget it, I'll go buy it at the store. But that's not me. So I asked my husband about building raised beds. So we started building raised beds, and went and got some compost dirt over at Miami, Oklahoma, where they have the mushroom plants over there. Here comes another gust of that big old wind. So I filled these raised beds up with that, and I have reverted back to my intensive planting, or thick planting, or no spaced planting, whatever is better terminology. And again, it's back to, I don't have to water as much. Let me just show you this green bean. Isn't that a beautiful green bean? I know that's kind of strange. You may be looking at me going, how's a green bean beautiful? But do you see any bug damage? No. And every bean I picked this morning, no bug damage, because, and this is just my theory, I'm no scientist, I'm no bugologist, so I don't know that this is a fact or not, but I think with this intense planting, with planting everything so close, I think the bugs have a hard time finding it, because all they're seeing are leaves. They're not seeing the fruit underneath. They're not seeing the beans. The beans are hidden, so they're not seeing them. I think another factor that, may just be my blessings here is I have plenty of purple martins that eat a lot of bugs. I have a lot of good bugs out in the garden. I have a lot of, see, the only thing I'm having to pull off of here is grass. I have a lot of ladybugs out there. I have, can't think of what you call them, those little tiny wasps. They don't sting people, but they, like, eat the bugs, or not eat the bugs. They they prey upon the bad bugs. But I have them out there, and I'll see other of the good bugs out there. I'll have orb weavers out there that, and I love orb weavers. That may sound weird that I like spiders, but orb weavers are so, I even have some that live up here on the porch, and you would never know it unless you go out at night, because they'll put their huge massive webs out at night. You know, back here, like here, they'll put their big massive webs, and they'll put them out. They'll start at dark, and they'll put these big huge webs out, and then by the time the sun comes up, the webs are gone. They are the best house guests because they clean up their mess, and then the next night they'll put them all out again. So I think they're the coolest spiders. Well, they live also out in the garden and do the same thing. So wonderful bug catchers, you know, they're welcome here. I know you saw me digging around out there in the up under those plants, and some of you might have been thinking, what if there's a snake up under there? Well, could there be a snake up under there? Sure, there could be. Have I ever found a snake up under there? No. Now, there is a snake lives out there, and she's lived there for years. I don't have any problem with her. She can live there as long as she wants to. And it's a little garter snake, and she's about, she's maybe a foot long, and about as big as one of these green beans in circumference. I mean, she's a little itty thing, but she's lived out there for years, and I know she's out there taking care of stuff, so I don't bother her. She does a good job. The birds do a good job. I even plant sunflowers. I don't plant the sunflowers for me to get the seeds from. I plant the sunflowers to encourage the birds to come into the garden. Now, the only green bean I seen this morning that had any damage at all was one green bean that was poking out from under a leaf, and I guess a bird had found a bug or something on it, because there was just one peck out of a green bean, and that was the only damaged green bean that I found out there. So I don't use any pesticides, no insecticides on my garden. You know, I don't want to use poison on it if I absolutely do not have to. Again, other people may have to because they have such a huge issue with bugs, and if you have to, honey, you do what you have to do. Another thing is just the time to do it all. Do I have just all the time in the world? No. I still work full time. My husband still works full time. Sorry, another gust of wind, but it sure feels good. But we still work full time, and we still have all of this to take care of. But trying to do the garden, and it's like this. When I get done with the green beans and putting them up, I have cabbage to pick. I have got more beans, my runner beans. I've got them to go out there and do. I have got cucumbers. I am going to pull up my lettuce that has gone to seed, and the plants can go to the goats and chickens. What else? Probably need to weed around some of my in-ground plants because they do have weeds. I think I'm going to all raised beds next year, but my raised bed plants have no weeds in them. I've got peppers to pick. I think I said cabbage already. I was looking at my carrots yesterday. Woo-hoo. This is the first year I'm going to have a carrot harvest. I've never been able to grow a carrot. And this year, I had an extra pack. I think it was a free packet from Baker Creek. And so I was like, I'm getting rid of this free packet of seeds. So I put out these carrots from this free packet of seeds. And I've got the most beautiful carrot patch. And the carrots are almost big enough to pick. And it's like, that is amazing. Now, I don't like cooked carrots, so those boogers are going to get eat raw because neither one of us like cooked carrots. And anyway, that's things that are still coming up. And like I said, these beans, in a couple of days, there'll be more. I'm sure there's some out there now that I've missed, but I know there was a whole bunch of small ones that in just literally 2 or 3 days, they'll be ready to be picked. Also, my runner beans. Can't forget them. I've got a bunch of, I planted several different varieties of runner beans, and they're big and need to be picked. I could let them go until they're dry, but if I do that, I mean, they're wonderful eaten dried as dried beans, but I may do that later in the year. Right now, I want to continue producing, so I need to pick them. And just like the green beans, once it gets later in the year and things kind of slow down, what if I miss some of them with that real thick planting? What if I miss not seeing some and they don't get picked? Well, that's okay. They'll dry and they'll become my seeds for next year. And I'll be able to get some more Blue Lake green beans planted. These are the only beans my husband will eat, is green beans. And so that's why I'd plant a bunch. Now, something that I want to get for green beans, because he just, for whatever reason, likes them. That's what he grew up eating. So he likes eating them that way, is French style green beans. So I need to get me one of them Frenching things that slices them up that way. But anyway, that is what's going on here right this minute in the garden. And my mister's done switched over from the lawnmower to the weed eater. He's a busy man. So I'm gonna continue on with these beans this morning and get them done. Probably get a batch of them cooked, because I sure have been wanting some green beans and new potatoes. So I'll probably have to go out in the garden and dig around and see if I can get some new potatoes to go with them. And I've got some ham bone in there to cook them up with, because you know, I like pork cooked up in the beans, no matter what kind of beans they are. So I'm going to finish this up. I'm going to sit here while I'm doing it and watch the birds teaching their babies to fly. But I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you come back again real soon. And leave me a comment below. Are you gardening? Are you visiting farmers markets? Do you have plans to garden? Or do you get your stuff out of the store? And what type of prices are you seeing at the stores? You know, I just wondering, you know, around the country, how prices are going. Because, you know, you'd think with everything being harvested that prices ought to be pretty decent right now, but I don't know. And because that's not where I get my stuff. But let me know how you liking the channel, and send me some love. I love y'all, and hope to see you again real soon. Mountain Patriot Homestead, signing out.